Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto become the leader of Bijuu Academy with mysterious power of God. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. The theater god, the bully, and the socially inept loser. I didn't want to fall in love with him. I hadn't planned on it. The fact that I did pisses me off every day. I mean, my life wasn't lame enough already. Fate had to throw fucking curveball at my face and knock me on my ass. I stared at the tip of my number 2 pencil and contemplated shoving it through my eye, straight into my brain. I set it down on the desk quick Why as soon as that idea suddenly became very appealing and, with my shitty ass luck, I wouldn't die. No, I'd just lose an eye and suffer permanent brain damage, forcing me to constantly drool and unable to hold things properly. I could see it all now. I'd have an eye patch with some random design that could magically make me look like a flamer while drool ran down my chin and I'd shout at the top F my lungs at the most inappropriate moments in front of the entire school. Oh Gaara. I love you, you sexy beast. Please take me until my throat becomes raw from all my screaming and blood pours from my mouth in an endless tribute to your gorgeous hair. But with more stuttering and mispronounced words, because I imagine I'd be fortunate like that. I gave a silent scream, slamming my fist down onto the hard surface before bringing them up to cover my face. Yes, death, please take me now. I don't care how, just take me and please hurry it up. I let out a frustrated groan and tried to keep my mind off of blue-green eyes. I had no idea you hated social conformity so much, Mr. Uzumaki. I spread my fingers to peek through them for a second before snapping them back together to hide my glowing face. That's right, I was still in class, what'd kinda forgot about that. I let my hands drop and gave a glowing smile to the class that had turned to look at me. I apologized and laid my head down on the cool wooden surface after they'd turned away. Of course Gaara was seated 2 rows ahead of me, still staring at me like I'd come from another planet and had turned into a giant mucus alien right before his eyes. Death, please, I beg of you. Be merciful for once in my life and strike me down this very moment before I make an even bigger ass out of myself. Of course that rogue bastard ignored my pleas and I had to sit there for the rest of the lecture with my face on fire and the inability to lift my head from the desk. The class was dismissed after another half an hour, but I sat there, eyes boring into the wood in front of my face, before attempting to look up after 5 minutes. Sakura looked down at me with an amused expression while Hinata tugged on the sleeves of her jacket on the other side of the desk. Let me guess. The pink-haired girl grinned and stood aside while I gathered my things together, face still heated. You had another spontaneous Gaara-induced freak out. I refused to answer her question and walked towards the door. I'll take that as a yes. Her laughter made me cringe in embarrassment as we walked into the hallway. It really isn't funny, I growled, trying not to feel like I just wanted to shrink into the size of a flea and lay around to be squished by some random shoe. Did you see that look on his face? I think I weirded him out with my display of idiocy. Fuck, if I bought a gun, would one of you shoot me in the head? Because I know I'd manage to fuck that up somehow. They both laughed at me and shook their heads. I groaned and pushed the door out of my way as we walked out of the building and onto the sprawling school grounds. Fine, you both suck. See if I ever mercy kill either of you when you need it. I flopped gracefully onto the grass and rolled onto my side, pulling off the stupid black jacket and bunching it up to use for a pillow. Sakura and Hinata sat down on either side of me, the pale-eyed girl careful to tuck the standard knee-length beige skirt under her legs to keep from exposing herself to the entire campus, while the green-eyed girl just threw herself down in a perfect imitation of me. I leaned my head on Sakura's thigh and tangled my fingers with both girls' offered hands. Why am I socially inept? Probably because Auntie Tsunade dropped you on your head one too many times as a kid. I snorted. The sad thing is it's probably true. Quote, you should call her tonight and yell at her. Hinata signed quickly, her pale hands flittering about. That sent us all into a laughing fit. Oh, be really vague about it though. Sakura piped in. Knowing her, she'll get angry, then apologize and send you some money. It took me a full minute to calm down and I felt 100 times better when I did. I eased the two girls' fingers gently and felt them both squeeze back. I found myself thanking whatever force in the universe had decided to give these two girls to me. I'd met Sakura when I was 10. She was my guardian's youngest sister's daughter, but the two had had a falling out before either of us had been born, so we didn't know each other until they miraculously made up one summer when the family had decided to move back to the city. After that first meeting we became inseparable. The fact that we weren't actually related didn't stop us from claiming the other as our cousin. Most didn't understand our relationship since the pink-haired girl spent most of the time yelling at me for doing dumb things. After a year in the city, her parents got their grant and had to travel over the world. EY decided to send her to boarding school a couple of 100 miles away, and we threw a fit until Tsunade agreed to send me as well. Hinata came into our lives our first fall at Bijuu Academy, forced into hanging out with us because she was Sakura's roommate, and just because she couldn't speak didn't mean we were going to let her continue with her reclusive lifestyle. The petite, fair-skinned, lavender-eyed girl had been born a mute, and that made Sakura and I very grateful for her parents wasting our summer learning sign language, though my cousin had to give me 12 refresher courses in Aneda was constantly correcting me when I misunderstood something. The Hyuga was usually pretty meek, which made her an odd addition to our crazy duo, but if she got mad enough or started PMSing Hitch, I'm sure is the same thing, though Sakura punched me in the face when I'd said it. She could bitch someone out amazingly well. Her hands would almost become a blur, and I often stopped a rant to ask her to slow down. Though that usually dissipated her anger quickly. Usually though, I would get pretty pissed that the people she was yelling at couldn't understand her and end up yelling for her. We were a tight trio. All of us too offbeat for the rest of our peers, but just right for each other. I smiled at the sky above me and squeezed the hands again, laughing when it was returned once more. So what are you going to do about, I sighed. Let's go off campus for lunch. Don't change the subject. Hinata scolded me, eyes narrowing. I'm not. I grinned at the two women and sat up. I'm hungry, and everyone knows you can't think of amazing ideas to make a certain guy notice you if you've got no brain fuel. Sakura smirked, and I could see the sarcastic reply in her eyes before the look dropped into a scowl pointed over my shoulder. Great, she muttered darkly, annoyance tearing into the word. I followed her gaze and cringed internally. I hate God. I dropped the girl's hands instantly and slid the blazer back on as Tenten and Matsuri stopped in the grass in front of us, a sneer on Ino's face directed at the three of us. Well, Luki, it's the school's most freakish threesome made up of the school's biggest rejects. Ino's nasally voice making my skin crawl as much as her horrible pastel makeup. As usual, Matsuri wasn't paying much attention to what's stuck in a book. Tenten seemed off though. She looked uncomfortable, glancing around at our peers scattered about in the courtyard. Fuck off, you stupid whore. Sakura snarled. My eyes widened before I grinned at my cousin's brazen behavior. Suddenly proud, I smirked up at the annoying blonde as her eyes narrowed dangerously. Did His Majesty Sasuke blow you off again, so you had to come harass us? Why? Oh, you know sadism is considered a mental disorder, right? The fuck did you just say to me, you fucking dyke? Back off, androgynous bitch. Her face turned bright red as her anger grew, and I knew we were playing with fire as my pink-haired cousin pushed it farther than she ever had before. I braced myself, prepared to throw myself between her and my cousin or Hinata if she so chose, and also prepared or the full force of her nails and fangs as I knew I couldn't fight back, but then Matsuri lowered her book and held out a hand in front of her angered friend. Ino glared at her friend, sneered at us a final time and spun around, walking away from us like the argument had been officially dropped like last season's Prada bag. The three of us just sat there, dumbstruck for a few minutes, wondering what the fuck had just happened. We are now entering the Twilight Zone. The tension in the air dropped and Sakura laughed at my lame joke. We calmed and my cousin leaned her head against my shoulder. I smiled and patted her on the top of her head, chuckling when she punched me in the thigh. Hinata lowered her head onto my unoccupied shoulder seconds later, but held her hands out for a quick message. Gaara's watching us. I went stock still and tried to force my goosebumps to disappear. Chill, Spaz, Sakura whispered. You can't freak out every time his eyes are on you. He'll think you're a loser. Too late for that, don't you think? I snorted. Sakura laughed and they both gave me a simultaneous punch to the ribs. Like the blonde I am, I forgot that I wasn't supposed to be acting like a total loser and grabbed my sides. Falling backwards. Oh no. Internal bleeding. Such manly punches from such little women. I flopped around on the ground in fake agony. What do you mean manly? Sakura shrieked, mock offense in her voice, before wailing on me some more. I laughed and tried to army crawl away. My cousin grabbed me and jumped onto my back. No, don't crush me. I managed to get out between laughs. Torture me not. Kill me now and let me die in peace. I could feel the green-eyed girl shaking with laughter on top of me as I inched my way forward, not really caring if I got grass stains on the beige slacks. I continued on at a snail's pace until a pair of very obviously expensive shoes stood directly in my way. I looked up as best as I could, but the face was blocked by a pair of crossed arms. Having fun, Uzumaki? A deep voice asked. I shuddered at the sound of it. I didn't have to see the face to know who it was. I only knew one person with that voice. Heya Sasuke. I mumbled as I felt Sakura stand and 2 sets of hands helped me to my feet. I gave him a sarcastic smile as I brushed dirt and grass from my body, waiting for the snaky insult that I was sure was about to be flung at me. Sasuke Uchiha had had it out for me the moment I stepped on campus. Seriously, I stepped out of the car, talking to Sakura over my shoulder and ran right into him. Well, he dropped his coffee, which crashed open on his luggage, turning the dark red fabric even darker and taa instant enemy for life. Super. He made my past 2 years here even more sucky than they should have been. What do you want? He smirked at me and tilted his head to the side. I was wondering if you would like to join me for lunch. The shock must have been written clearly on my face because his smirk only grew. My brain was stunned into unresponsiveness. The Sasuke I knew would never invite me to eat with him and the rest of the school's bullying geniuses. The Sasuke I knew wouldn't smile at me unless there was some sort of prank being pulled on me. The Sasuke I knew wouldn't talk to me without a sneer on his face and distaste in his voice. Yeah, as much fun as being lured away in. Beaten in an alley sounds like a fun time, we've already got plans. I tried to make myself sound confident, but it didn't completely work. I stole a quick glance at Sakura and Hinata on either side of me. Both girls looked as suspicious of the dark-eyed boy as I felt, glaring at the boy whom everyone on campus recognized as my official bully. I grabbed their hands and took a step back, forcing them to follow. So, we'll just be going now. I grinned brightly, but it died when the Uchiha stepped towards us again. They're invited as well, of course. My eyes narrowed. What was he playing at? Did he really expect me to bring my friends along to what was sure to be a public humiliation? This couldn't end well. We were thinking Pigalle would be a good place. Sakura asked, distrust-s. Oh, clear on her face it made her look like she'd spit with the word. Neji, Shikamaru, Shino and I. His eyes barely darted over to her before resting back on me. There's nothing up my sleeve. No need to murder me with your eyes. He growled, losing his patience already. I glared at him. This is coming from the guy who. 2 hands clamped down over my mouth before I muttered something really stupid and got my ass kicked again. Sorry, but we already made plans with Lee. Sakura lied easily. Maybe some other time. We backed away quickly before turning around and speed walking back towards the school building. As we passed other students I realized everyone had been watching our exchange with the Uchiha, waiting for me to either get beaten up or verbally cut down. And all looked as confused as I felt. Except Gaara Sabaku, of course. He was exchanging words with Matsuri and continuing to disregard my existence as usual. Once we turned the corner, the hands dropped mine but we continued with our quick pace. Where are we going? I asked. To find Lee. Hinata tossed my way. What? Why? That guy's so exhausting. Oh, and you're just Peach. The girls laughed and I glared at them. They got to get to him before Sasuke does and checks our story. Can you imagine what he would do to you if he knew we lied and just turned down the unturned down Abel? You'd probably die of something weird nobody could trace back to him. My eye twitched. She was right, of course. Sasuke had ego issues. Major ego issues. And messing with them wasn't something one did lightly, unless you're me and are too stupid to know when enough is enough. We broke into a sprint, sliding slightly as we hit the corners with speed. Shit, 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 I'm so dead. Tell the old lady to bury me with my vinyls and some juice boxes. The green-eyed girl snorted. Oh ye of little faith. Lee's always at the track field at this time. I'll just convince him to go to lunch with us and all will be well. You're plannin'. On using your demonic feminine charms, aren't you? What else? This is why I love you. Lee of course agreed to go with us without a second thought as soon as Sakura asked him. His enthusiasm made me laugh. He wasn't too bad of a guy. He was just kind of hard to get used to. He had a volume control issue like I could talk and was obsessed with martial arts, and those two combined were a headache, trust me. I laughed as we showed our passes at the front gate and made our way to the town 5 minutes down the road. The guy obviously had a crush on my pink-haired cousin. It was so obvious that it was almost embarrassing to watch. We made our way to the hidden book without incident and took the couches by the front window after ordering strange sandwiches and organic drinks that were the specialty of the cafe bookstore. No, I'm gonna go with Tony Jaa. I laughed around my mouthful of my delicious food. The shock on Lee's face was comical and made the rest of us laugh. No way. That's absurd. Obscene. The boy shouted. I rolled my eyes and promptly began to choke as something grabbing my drink to try and help the half-chewed food go down. After I regained control of myself, 3 pairs of eyes questioned me suddenly. My eyes darted across the room as a signal. Lavender eyes widened with light green when they caught it. Gaara was perched on a stool, his nose in an old-looking book. A simple cup of coffee in front of him and his ever-faithful tail, Matsuri, across from him, also glued to a book, though hers was much slimmer but just as old-looking. My eyes stayed glued to the object of my crush as a slender, pale hand reached up and brushed a strand of gorgeous crimson hair from his eyes before turning the page. I gulped. How had I not noticed him sitting there before? It was hard to miss him. He was gorgeous. Ever messy red hair framing a strong but delicate heart-shaped face with violent red. Dark black circles around his eyes made the strange color pop out. Pale skin that never seemed to darken glowed in contrast to his ever-black clothing. Today he had on a turtleneck, obviously worn under his white button-up that lay discarded on the bag beside his feet. Along with the red tie and black jacket. He was a god. I had never been interested in theater until I seen him in a play put on at the beginning of my freshman year at Bijuu. He commanded attention on the stage, though he didn't like attention off of it. He was a mysterious guy. A mysterious guy who had stolen my heart in that hour-long play. The guy who had made me come to terms with my S. I watched, enamored, as he lifted the cup and took a drink, licking his lips after he did, making a shudder run through me. Sakura elbowed me. Quit staring. You look like a love-sick teenager. I took another drink of my juice and stole another glance at the guy. I am. Don't be a girl. Tell him how you feel. Lee suddenly exclaimed, much to my horror. He knew about my preferences being my roommate as well as Sakura's annoyance. Hinata choked on her drink while Sakura sprayed my face with her tea. Gross. I wiped my face with my sleeve, terrified to look in Gaara's direction. When I gathered the courage to turn around, I wished I'd been a coward. Teal eyes were locked on our group, making me freeze. A nice course of, oh shit, running through me. Someone kill Lee. Sakura jumped up, shocking me out of my frozen state. I agree, Hinata. Just tell him. It can't be worse than suffering with your feelings like this. Write him a love letter or do something sweet for him. The dark-haired girl glowed crimson. Huh, I thought we were talking about oof. Lee doubled over as a book was kicked into his stomach. Oh, yeah, Hinata. Nothing good will come of doing nothing. Let your love for him be known. Nothing will happen if you keep it to yourself. All eyes were on us and I nearly fainted when I realized that Gaara and Matsuri were among them, Gaara's book lying forgotten on the table while he eyed us, sipping his coffee with a slight smirk on his face. I grabbed my book back and uniform jacket, giving a sheepish grin to the other patrons of my favorite place, and hurried my group out the door. We walked in silence, which surprised me since Lee was there, and were halfway back to school before Sakura spoke up. What was he doing there? I raised an eyebrow at her. He's kind of an artsy guy and that would be the place I would expect to find him. I mumbled, seriously still embarrassed. How many times could I make a fool out of myself in front of him in one day? I know that, but that's our place. I've never seen him there before and we've been going there for 2 years. She seemed kind of angry for some reason. It's got several rooms and levels. Maybe he's just never in the front. Hinata signed. That's true. And I have seen Matsuri around there and wherever she is Gaara isn't far behind. Today has been weird. I responded shaking off my embarrassment-induced depression and smiling brightly at her. But the days with us are never anything but. I laughed. My 3 companions smiled at me and the conversation rolled on easily. When we got back, the 4 of us hung around for the extra 20 minutes of our lunch hour before parting for our separate classes. As they left I felt uneasy about my last 2 classes. Photography would be a breeze as always. But math, Gaara would be there, as well as Sasuke. I shook off my doubts and dashed down the hall as the bell rang for class. My mood brightened significantly in photography when the Professor complimented my understanding of my subjects and my compositions. Hinata with a wistful expression on her face, a longing that I'd captured before she turned to me, Sakura in a rage in the other. And a shot of the woods behind the school, mist twisting through the trees, both inviting and forbidding. The last one was my favorite. It was peaceful while holding a lurking terror. I was terrified of the forest. It wasn't the same one. But to me they all looked the same and that was terrifying. It had been a last-minute shot as I jogged out to the track field with Lee and that just made it more perfect for me. I smiled and gathered my things as the bell rang and hurried to my next class. My heart skipped a beat when I saw Gaara sitting in his usual spot in the front but I passed him naturally and made my way to the back. Ignoring the look I could feel Sasuke giving me, where Lee would join me when he got here. There was no praise in this class. It was my worst subject. I was just barely hanging onto my C. I jotted down notes and doodled absent-mindedly, my eyes straying to the red head of my affections frequently. He was slouched over his ever-present heavy-looking book, only occasionally jotting something down. I wondered briefly how he held the second highest grade in the class second to Sasuke while he did nothing but stare at those huge books of his. The bell rang and I jumped out of my thoughts and shoved my things away quickly before standing. Gaara had disappeared in the seconds I'd taken my eyes off of him. How does he do that? I muttered under my breath. Lee quirked an eyebrow at me but I waved it off and the 2 of us made our way to our dorm at a casual pace. I was going to change before meeting my girls in the rec room. Our library I've sometimes heard it referred to. I kicked off my loafers as I entered my room and waited for Lee to change into his workout gear and head to the track field before slipping out of my clothes. I wasn't embarrassed to change in front of him. I had just learned that I couldn't match his speed for getting dressed again before he flung open the door and ran from the room. I'm pretty sure half of our floor had seen my boxers more than once. I pulled my favorite pair of orange skinnies from the drawer and pulled them on, grabbing a dark blue t-shirt and slipped into the black DCs. I stretched and pulled the shirt on, grabbing a violent construction worker orange hoodie and bag before I headed out. Naruto. I wrote a poem for you. This isn't like me. Poetry is not my strong suit, for words do not come easily to me, but, dear Naruto, you make me unlike myself. And that makes me fear you, yet think so highly of you. This infatuation with your smile keeps me awake deep into the night and, when sleep does come, plagues my dreams. You are like a drug that I am so addicted to but I welcome this addiction. I wonder if my feelings would be a burden to you. But I cannot contain them. It almost hurts to see you smile knowing that I am not the cause but I cannot talk to you. I fear you rejecting me more than the summer fears the descent of fall. It almost hurts when you walk by and do not greet me. Though there is no reason for you to call me anything but foe and that is a fault all my own. It cripples me when you pass by and do not notice what you have done to me. A failed poet. My face flared as my heart thudded. I'd just gotten back to the room after spending my evening with my friends and found an envelope addressed to me taped to the front door. I'd ripped it off and wandered into the quiet room. AQ. UICK scan of the room told me Lee wasn't done with his training showers. I observed the envelope. It was pretty plain, save for the elegant script that spelled out my name. I ripped it open, expectant. Gee, some stupid junk, and was greeted with this. I gulped and opened my door, looking each way and seeing no one. I frowned and stared at the paper in my hand. My face heated again and my heart raced as I reread the words. Wow. I lay down on my bed and read the words over and over. The poem was okay, but it was made better by the fact that it was written for me. I laughed lowly. A secret admirer. My first one ever. I jumped as the door slammed open and a freshly showered Lee walked in. I shoved the letter under my pillow and sat up quickly. What's up? Nothing. Why? What's what? Quit staring at me, I practically shouted. Lee raised an eyebrow at me. What? Nothing, I responded, kicking off my shoes and pulling of my pants and crawling into bed, hand wrapped around the letter under my pillow. Love is a bad joke. Everyone changes. You're hiding something. Sakura practically snarled. Light green eyes narrowed, stabbing me with a look that made me want to piss myself and cry like a baby. I glanced between Sakura and Hinata, whose eyes were also narrowed with suspicion. I gulped nervously and took a few steps back before being stopped by a wall while obscenities ran through my EAD in a voice that oddly sounded like Leon Crack. My laughter at that thought died when I remembered my current situation. You always get super quiet when you're hiding something. And I've never heard you this quiet. Never. Who? My cousin could barely contain her excitement, bouncing in her seat, eggs Benedict forgotten on the plate in front of her. Hinata leaned in as well, her smile mackin'. Gee, all the ones I'd seen in the past look like frowns. Who is it? I flinched and looked around the room again before turning back to my friends. Like I know. You know about as much as I do. This is possibly the most exciting thing that's ever happened to us. My cousin gushed, apparently forgetting that it was written for me, and scanned the letter again. A failed poet. Who could it be? When did you get it? Last night after I got back from hanging out with you guys. I smiled broadly, her excitement infectious. A warm feeling unfurled in my heart, spreading down to my stomach and toes. I felt like I could dance. I felt like I could sing. After feeling like I didn't belong at this school, one note made it all okay. I deflated a bit. Okay, so maybe I am sorta stupid. It was taped to the door. Such beautiful handwriting. I wonder if it's a girl. Sakura frowned and pushed a stand of pink hair off her forehead, her eyes lost in concentration. Hinata bit her lip and chewed on her fingernail, eyes on the letter, working through the problem in her head. The purple-haired girl smiled after a few moments. If it is a girl, just tell her you have a girl at home. She signed. Yeah. I smiled again, feeling a little better about it. Sakura smiled softly at her roommate, making the girl blush slightly. I raised a brow but let it slide on by. You know, if this was an all-boys school, I wouldn't have this problem. I stated blandly, propping an arm on the table and laying a face in my hand. You'd also only have Lee to hang out with. Sakura rolled her eyes. And die of loneliness. I grinned, taking the piece of paper back, refolding it and tucking it into my shirt pocket. There is the possibility it is a boy still. Hinata offered, her face deep in concentration. How so? I asked after swallowing a bite of the omelet in front of me. Well, the author would have had to go into the boys' dorm, then wander around until they found your nameplate, and that would have been very risky. Especially since your dorm is on the 5th floor and the number of halls they would have to search just to find your room. I don't think someone shy enough to leave a letter would have risked expulsion just to tell you how they felt. Sakura nodded vigorously. That's true. And the part about their feelings being a burden to you. How could they be a burden for any other reason than coming from a male? And the part about poetry not being something they're good at. Most girls wouldn't think about that. That and it seems so very off in its wording. Agreed. Girls confess with their feeling just poured onto the page. This seems too thought out. Like they didn't want you to be offended or hurt by the words written. You think? I mumbled, fingers rubbing the paper in my pocket. I made a face. Some girls are like that though. Not every female is a slave to her emotions like Sakura. I smiled and received a fist to the top of my head. Like you have any room to talk, little Miss Queen. she snapped with a smile. I grinned up sheepishly, still rubbing the sore spot. She stuck her tongue out and sat back down. Though you are the least gay-looking gay guy I've met. True. Maybe you should wear more pink. Hinata beamed at me. Hey, how about you both just fuck off? I stepped into the auditorium with a smile. After a long and comical conversation about my inability to court like a flamer, though I was gaga over a guy, Sakura and Hinata waved goodbye and headed for physics, leaving me with a cheery attitude and a look into what my life could be like if I was totally out and had an opposite personality. I laughed and made my way down the aisles of empty seats towards the slowly filling stage. The informality of the class made me love the art that I'd only taken an interest in because of a red-haired theater god. Drama was well suited for me, as the teacher often said. If for no other reason than my energy. Choji and Kiba glanced at me as I passed them on the stairs at the side of the stage. I gave them a smile and appreciated it when they returned it. I pulled the black strap of my neon messenger bag over my head and took a seat by the thick curtain, not bought. Herring with the group that was gathered in the center. They didn't like to be bothered. I'd learned this. They were all Gaara's followers, his fan club, his disciples, I suppose. They took drama very serious. Deadly serious. All had pale skin, dark hair with bright neon streaks and talked with a bored drawl in mostly rhyming lyrics. They were pretty freaky, though I was always an appreciated part when they didn't have one of their own kind because of how into it I got. I wasn't exactly hangout material to them and I knew it. I chuckled. Not that I would want to. The teacher, Kurenai Yuhi, walked out of the left wing and called the class to order after the bell had rung, pulling all of the students in a circle around her. All right, class. Her severe voice made all of us quiet down faster than yelling could have. As you all know, she started after she knew she had our attention. Preparations for our autumn production will be starting today. A majority of the students nodded their heads. I just stared at the mole on her face, wondering if she ever drew a stick figure body beneath it and made weird voices for it to talk with. Auditions were held last week. The play has been cast and now, aside from lines needing to be memorized, all that is really left is building the set and constructing the costumes. I groaned internally and let my mind wander. My fun class to start the D. I was now turned into the free labor class. While we built the autumn production set, I fell asleep in biology more than once since Kiba and I were the ones hauling everything, being decidedly more muscular than most of the class. Kurenai was still speaking when I tuned back in, so I tuned back out and wondered about the letter. Sakura and Hinata had me pretty convinced that the writer was male. The hard part was figuring out who that male was. No one had ever seemed to take any interest in me at all. Except Sasuke, and him sending me feelings was less than likely. It was downright absurd. I laughed. So that shortened the list to no one. A detective. I am not. Naruto. I jumped at the sound of my name. Yeah. I shook myself awake and found myself lost in that blue-green mist that almost pulled me under. What was he doing here? Like I said, Gaara will be supervising the completion of the set. Since you are the most energetic and fit, you'll be working alongside him, making sure the background meets his specifications. I gulped, and pretty much drank in the tall lean figure with my eyes. He'd stripped his white button up and stood before me in a figure-hugging, black UA undershirt. The fabric almost shining under the stage lights. My knees went weak and I felt like swooning into a faint at his feet. The redhead stared at me with his unnerving eyes, his face a serene neutral before breaking into a smug smirk. That serene feeling was crushed by a sudden rise in annoyance. What the fuck was that smirk about? I've assigned you all to groups. Each group will work on a different act, blah blah blah. I expect the best from you. The students rushed forward and broke off into different groups with ease, noise level rising as they each decided on subgroups for each job that had to be done. I wandered forward and searched for my name. When I found it, my annoyance exploded. Misk, are you serious? Yes. Like I said, you're working with Gaara, but at this point, you will be helping each group when they need you. I made a face. Problem, Uzumaki. I whipped around, my heart fluttering at the sound of that deep masculine voice wrapped around my name. I shook my head dumbly, and that arrogant smirk was back, making my knees weak while anger flooded my brain. Who knew I'd developed a crush on the most arrogant son of a bitch in the entire world? Gaara Sabaku was gorgeous. He was talented. He was intelligent. He was able to make people fall at his feet with a look. He could turn just about anyone on with just a word. And you could tell he fucking knew it and that he fucking used it to his advantage. Note to self. Get to know someone before developing a crippling crush on them. Note back to self. You like how he uses that power. Haha, too late, dumbass. I groaned while the redhead measured the cut piece of wood carefully over and over again. Just get on with it. I spat, my arms aching. He shot me a look and turned back to his measuring tape before giving a nod to Karen and Kiba. Just as the two got to work nailing the board in place, I jumped back and let go as my arms gave out. The plywood fell to the floor with a loud bang, making everyone around jump and narrow eyes stabbing me with anger. I rubbed my sore arms and smiled sheepishly. The two with the hammers sighed and turned away. Pick it up. Gaara growled at me. I fought the urge to flip him off, though my heart fluttered in my chest, and lifted the piece of wood once more. The redhead measured again and again before giving the go-ahead nod. The two worked quickly, putting the stands on the heavy piece of wood while the evil theater god watched with careful blue-green eyes. I didn't let go until I saw the two step back. Aren't there supposed to be two people holding this thing up? I complained loudly, rubbing my biceps as they screamed in agony. I hated being stage crew. Hated it, hated it, hated it, hated it. No one can be spared. This piece has to be the most stable, he explained, measuring again. You know, being so anal retentive is bad for you. Was all I got in reply, but I could tell it was almost a question. Oh yeah, I nodded, lifting another piece of plywood. But you really only notice when you get older. I watched the redhead fight to keep from rolling his eyes. It didn't really look like it was working. I chuckled internally. It's the strangest thing. Your ass just gets sucked into you, asshole. Most anal retentives don't notice, but it happens. At this point some of them ease up and start letting things slide, but others, phew, a whole different story. Their ass just keeps on sucking. I'm in, till one day SHLOOP. They're gone. Just sucked into their own anus. Like a black hole. It's the most bizarre thing you've ever seen. In extreme cases though it's even worse. I knew a guy who's seen an anal retentive suck up an entire swimming pool and 7 other people with him when his anus sucked him up. I stopped abruptly, almost drive, opping the plywood in my hands as all the air seeming to leave my body in a rush. This whole brain before mouth thing, no wonder I was a social outcast. I didn't dare turn to look at Gaara, the object of my affections. The red-headed god I worshipped from afar, the teal-eyed man I had just stupidly ran my mouth off to. The few people in my peripheral vision had also stopped moving as well, making me all the more nervous. What the fuck did I just say? I was having a hard time recalling my exact words. Kiba Inuzuka broke the silence first, his loud booming laughter amplified by the auditorium. Dude, what the fuck? The shaggy brunette clutched his stomach as if he were in pain and he crumpled to the floor. It seemed as if most of the class decided to follow his example and laughter rose in the spacious room. Loud hee-hawing, badly stifled giggles and deep echoing chuckles rose from all around me. I grinned sheepishly and tried my hardest to not look at the pale man behind me. I lowered my head, blonde bangs obstructing my view, and turned, carrying the board to the table saw set up in the corner. A darkly clad Gaara worshipper huffed at me with a sneer before striding away quickly. I sighed and waited for the redhead to come up and measure the pencil lines before I got to work with the saw. Long, slender, pale fingers didn't touch the board until the laughter had died completely. Voice S of the class rising in conversation again. He didn't speak to me as he worked, just adjusting the lines where he saw fit, measuring, erasing, letting the suffocating silence between a stretch on and on with no end in sight. He tapped on the board and stepped back, sliding goggles onto his head. I pulled the horrendous plastic contraption over my eyes as well and got to work. My full attention was on the board in front of me, my brain not allowing my concentration to waver. After the piece was cut, I straightened up. You say the strangest things. That deep voice barely breathed out beside me. I jumped and spun around. Teal eyes were observing me with a look that unnerved me and sent my inner fangirl into a drooling idiot. I opened my mouth to respond, even though my brain had yet to catch up. And was saved by the loud dull trill of the bell. I ran from his eyes and scooped up my book bag, out the door before anyone could blink. My heart was thudding by the time I made it to my desk in French 3. I skidded to a stop and slammed myself down into the unforgiving wooden seat. Okay, heart, quit being such a lame-ass organ and calm the fuck down. The stupid little muscle had fin. Ally begun slowing its painfully rapid beating when a soft growl forced it to pound even faster. I fully expect you to join me for lunch today, Uzumaki. Ah, the onyx-eyed boy raised an eyebrow at me. That was disgustingly girlish. That's weird. I was just thinking your face was disgustingly girlish. I snapped back at the Uchiha standing beside me. The air around him buzzed angrily and I got ready to take a punch to the face when something horrible happened. Horrible and insanely divine. A soft, pale blush dusted his cheeks lightly, a dumbfounded look creeping into his eyes. I watched the haughty Uchiha crumple into a slightly embarrassed mess for about 30 seconds before he seemed to regain his composure. I just stared at him as there seemed to be a war waging in his head, his face alternating between a creepy smile and a menacing grimace. You're kind of freaking me out. I made a face, very unsure of what I should do, but unwilling to sit there silently. Sasuke snapped out of his stupor and flashed me his cocky, I'm an Uchiha love me, grin. So you're thinking of my face, huh? Get bent. Rage flashed in his eyes, but the grin stayed plastered to his face. You're joining me for lunch, he said calmly before walking back to his seat across the room. What the fuck are the boys in this school drinking? I mumbled, pulling my French reader out as PRR an hour and a half I lost myself translating conversations and responding. Much to Tsunade's surprise, I was very adept at learning languages. It was a gift that she loved to push me into. German, Italian, Spanish, and now French. I'd flown through the language programs set before me. There was just one I couldn't get a grasp on that I'd been dying to learn. Gaelic. After flunking out of the first lesson several times, we gave up. Oh, and Latin. But honestly, I didn't care too much for it. It was currently my favorite class because it was the only one where I was giving Sasuke a run for his money. RCL. As dismissed 10 minutes before the bell was set to ring, so I wandered about the empty halls, trying to remember which class the girls were in. My mind decided that subject was too boring and settled on the teal eyes that haunted me most of the day. I stopped myself from letting out a girlish sigh. To be perfectly honest, I don't know why I had such a crippling crush on the redhead. Especially after what I'd learned today. How had I never noticed his arrogant attitude? It was kind of really in your face. I turned down the hallway to head to the classic literature class one had next when Tu Fo RMS made me freeze and dash back the way I'd come. My heart pounded as I leaned against the wooden wall behind me as my brain scrambled to figure out what I'd just seen. Yeah, that had been Gaara. And the dark-haired figure he had been pressing against the wall. I peeked around the corner. Yup, fuck. What the fuck had I just walked in on? Take your hands off of me. Sasuke snapped, his voice echoing through the spacious hallway. Or what, Uchiha brat? Gaara growled. Or I'll break that pretty boy face of yours. The redhead's cold laughter filled the air around me, making a shiver run down my spine. Just try it. Remember, I'm watching you, you fucking snake. You foo. The bell trilled loudly above me, drowning out the brunette's words and making me jump about 10 feet in the air. All air left my lungs and I turned to head to the classroom. The two boys were no longer pressed together. In fact, I couldn't see Sasuke at all. Only the lithe redhead remained, leaning against the wall nonchalantly. I swallowed nervously and walked down the hall as others began to spill from the classrooms around me. Teal eyes locked onto me when there was only 2 feet between us. Uzumaki. My Art skipped and a smirk spread out on his pale angelic face, as though he knew. Yeah, I asked informally, trying to give off the same uncaring air he was exuding. He pushed off from the wall and stared down at me. After classes end, I will need your assistance. Come to the stage room. He muttered, then walked off, as if expecting that I would do as he said. My anger flared and I stomped to the classroom, slamming my book bag on the floor and taking a seat angrily. That smug fucker could wait for hours for all I cared. I'm not an obedient puppy. That bastard told me we were joining him for lunch. Sakura hissed, her hands gripping onto my shirt so tightly I feared she would smack me just for the hell of it. He didn't ask, he told, arrogant piece of shit. I'm going to beat the ever-livin' crap out of that snotty asshole. Just wait. Till graduation. I looked over at Hinata, begging for help. The lavender-eyed girl seemed to be stuck between amusement and fear. I'm gonna rip those balls right off his body and shove them down Ino's throat since she seems to love them so much. Sakura, don't you think you're taking this out on the wrong person? I whispered. The pink-haired girl let out a sigh and released me. Sorry, he just pisses me off so much. Tell me about it. Hinata rolled her eyes. What's his deal? I grumbled, pushing the door open and walking out into the warm sunlight in the courtyard. The both of them. What was that? I rolled my eyes. Gaara ordered me to come to the auditorium after classes ended today. Sakura squeaked. Hooray, cuzzy. She jumped on my back. I yelped and fell to the ground. I tried in vain to pry myself from her death grip. The more I pulled, the tighter her deceptively skinny arms wound around my shoulders. You must be pumped. She squealed into my back. I squirmed under her light body, trying to regain the breath she was squeezing out of me. On the ground again, Uzumaki. Shit. Sakura let go instantly, helping me to my feet once again. Uchiha. I mumbled, slightly angered that he'd even show his face. I knew the meeting in the hallway wasn't a pleasant one, and I was still kinda pissed at the smug redhead, but say, him pressed so close to Gaara still had my blood boiling. Hinata took her place beside me, a glare on her face. What can I do for you today? Lunch, idiot. I told you this morning you'd be joining us today. I met his glare with my own, though I'm sure that his was much more threatening. I don't know where you get off on. The brunette cut me off. My car's waiting. Oh, Hinata, Neji is pleased that you will be there. I turned to see pale eyes roll and for a moment I forgot my argument. I just felt sorry for Hinata being dragged into whatever prank was being pulled on us. It wasn't a secret Neji hated his cousin. In fact, I don't think a blind person could miss the looks of hate he shot at her. The purple-haired girl never told us why the long-haired boy seemed to harbor so much hate towards her, but I did know that. Until recently, the feeling hadn't been returned. Sakura opened her mouth. Her shift in stance told me she was going to fight, but the mute Hyuga surprised us both, heading silently for the gates. The pink-haired started, her light green eyes growing wide with concern and some other emotion that I couldn't quite place, an emotion so warm, it made me concerned. Sakura, I questioned softly. Large green eyes snapped to me, widening slightly before drifting back to the back of the long-haired girl almost to the front gates. The pink-haired girl grabbed my hand and pulled me after our friend. I peeked to see a satisfied-looking Sasuke on our heels, a serene smile on his face. I gulped loudly when my heart skipped a beat. What the fuck? We passed the gate, the guard not even bothering to check our passes, just nodding respectfully at Sasuke. The power of money, I snorted, rolling my eyes. I followed my girls into the back seat of the large black car, a stoic driver standing beside the door. Who closed it softly after Sasuke had climbed in after me. The onyx-eyed boy smirked at me taking a seat beside me, studying me. I shivered and glanced at the two girls sitting across from us. Frowning slightly, green and purple were locked together in an intense stare that made me feel odd, excluded. I turned away from them quickly, staring out the window. The trees were beginning to lose their leaves, the colors starting to turn. The air would turn harsh soon, painful to breathe in. The world would become a barren wasteland until the snow came to cover it. Snow, white skin. I bet Gaara would make a believable Snow White. No, he exuded too much masculinity. He'd be the perfect Prince Charming. Calm and confident. Oh God. I started drooling. Even in a off shirt and dorky hat I imagine he'd be sexy. What are you thinking about? Gah. My jaw snapped shut as I turned to see Sasuke's eyes narrow suddenly. I panicked, my mouth moving before I could think. Gallivanting elephants. Nice save, moron. Hinata. The long-haired male stood as we entered the restaurant, bowing respectfully, though I had a feeling that he wasn't doing it willingly. Neji, the pale girl signed, nodding. I stood there awkwardly, not quite knowing what to do and super uncomfortable. The atmosphere was weird. I was out of my element. Everything around me looked super expensive and breakable. I was afraid to move. Sasuke took a seat and motioned for me to take the place next to him. I glanced around and stiffly took a seat. Sakura followed my example, looking as uncomfortable as I felt. I glanced at Hinata, who began signing quickly to her cousin, who responded with hands just as quick. Uzumaki. I turned to Sa carefully. I fought the urge to squirm. I think we got off on the wrong foot. Someone made sure we stayed there. I muttered lowly. His eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. What made you decide to come to Bijuu? I raised an eyebrow. What the hell was he playing at? Sakura. His eyes flashed dangerously. Really? Yeah. Her parents had to travel studying blah 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 and its effects on boring. They decided to send her here. I had to follow. I couldn't let him be alone. Sakura cut in, stirring her raspberry Italian soda. My cousin's a little too dumb to know when someone's bullying him. And he can barely defend himself. Oi! I shouted indignantly, elbowing her in the arm. She laughed and punched me in the side. That look was gone and his eyes bore into me. I didn't like it for the most part, but part of me enjoyed it immensely. I shook the thought from my head. Tell me about you. I raised an eyebrow, my dropping open. Seriously, where the fuck is Sasuke the bastard Uchiha? Can't we have a conversation? He snarled at me. I bristled. Whose fault is that? So I've made some mistakes. He muttered. I'm trying to make up for it. My anger cracked. Maybe this wasn't a trick. What if he really was sorry? I felt like an ass. Silence filled the table as we ordered. Only the two at the end seemed interested in conversation, signing faster than I could keep up with. Karen and Suigetsu, both never known for keeping their traps shut, seemed oddly moody. Well, the moody part wasn't odd, but the silent part was kind of weirding me out. Shino and Shikamaru were silent as well, but that was normal, well for them anyway. I like apple juice. Sasuke coughed into his coffee. What, juice? I prefer juice over every kind of drink. I don't read too much, but when I do, it's mostly sci-fi or classic fairy tales. My guardian, Tsunade, looks too young for her age. I have a dog, Kyubi. I like orange. I rambled, fighting the awkward atmosphere. I hated feeling awkward. It was the worst feeling in the world. Onyx's eyes looked at me expectantly. The silence just stretched on as our food arrived. That's all very nice, but I want to know about you. Sasuke cut into his ambiguous meat. But that wasn't enough. My heart shuddered. Wah. My face began to heat, my mind going blank, a faint crash making its way to my ears. I had no idea how to respond to that. I'd like to spend more time with you, Naruto. I just remember. Well, nothing. Naruto, if you don't respond, I'm going to assume you're a zombie and will chop your head off. I shook myself out of my stupor. Sakura was watching me carefully. Her green eyes concerned. I looked around, recognizing the library. Hinata was pretending to be buried in a textbook, glancing at me every few seconds. My head was still reeling from the weirdest thing I'd ever heard. The weirdest. I blushed. Sakura jumped back. Your face is so red it's scary. Did he really? Yeah, so I wasn't. No, I thought he. So did we. Oh God. I dropped my head into my hands. I couldn't piece anything together. Sasuke. Why the fuck was I freaking out so much over someone I hated? I mean, I never looked at Sasuke that way, had I? No, definitely not. I mean, only Gaara had ever made me. Shit. I jumped to my feet, grabbing my bag and rushing out the door. I ran as fast as I could, slamming through the theater doors and jumping onto the stage. Gaara. I fell breathlessly to the hard stage, letting the cool seep into my skin. You're late. A soft growl had me on my feet in seconds. Yeah, well, it's been a weird day. Soft blue-green eyes watched me carefully as I approached, setting my skin on fire. He had stripped down to his undershirt again, though he was wearing black jeans that seemed almost too tight. Making me thankful for whatever God made him dress like that. Really? Where's everybody else? He looked at me quizzically. Do you know what time it is? 5:30-ish. It's almost 8 o'clock. My jaw dropped. Seriously. The redhead nodded, leaning against the wall. Have, I blushed, looking away. Have you been waiting all this time? He snorted. Yes and no. I practiced with the others then worked on the set. He motioned to a painted piece of scenery. I looked at it for a moment before turning back to my crush. His beautiful eyes were locked onto the piece as well. So, you're not really a painter. Are you? I smacked myself internally. Yeah, I suck. I couldn't help but laugh, covering my gasp smoothly when he finally sent me a smile that didn't make me feel like he was playing with me. He walked forward and picked up a paintbrush. Are you going to help or just stand there? Hey, I'm not. Just standing here. I'm laughing too. Gaara was so unguarded as we painted. It was as if he were another person. Sure, he still didn't really talk, but he didn't seem so iced over. I stole glances at his serene face, my heart racing. After a while he dropped his paintbrush, watching me continue to apply layer upon layer of paint, adding shadows, highlights. You aren't bad. Yeah, I'd like to think that I'm pretty amazing. I giggled. I wouldn't go that far. We didn't leave until the janitor showed up and shooed us out. Night, Gaara. Good night, Uzumaki. He almost whispered, stepping close enough to me that I could smell his deep rich scent beneath the smell of paint. I stared up into his peculiar, beautiful eyes, lost in their depths. I don't know how long we stood there, just like I don't know how long I stood there after he grinned then left. I was floating. I didn't act weird. I didn't act like a girl. I was just a normal boy, a normal, breathless every 2 seconds, guy. I wandered to the dorms slowly, taking in the frigid night air, Lee hurrying after I realized the door would be locked in minutes. Naruto, I can't explain to you how much I long for your smile when you're not around. I seek you out in every crowd, every room. I can't even put my feelings into words. I know that other would say that this is a crush, but it feel almost like love. That can't be possible because I don't know you. I don't and I can't. You would hate me. I am not like you. You are the bright, warm and loving sun, while I am the cold, heartless moon. No, not even the moon. I am the stars. Stars are easily hidden. Stars barely exist. God, if I could just face you, see you, talk to you, be with you. In visions of the dark night, I have dreamed of joy departed but a waking dream of life and light hath left me broken-hearted. Ah, what is not a dream by day to him whose eyes are cast on things around him with a ray turned back upon the past. That holy dream, while all the world were chiding, hath cheered me as a lovely beam a lonely spirit guiding. What though that light, through storm and night, so trembled from afar? What could there be more purely bright in truth's day star? Edgar Allan Poe. I folded the paper carefully and tucked it under my pillow. My heart couldn't take any more today. To be honest, I'd forgotten all about my secret admirer. The day had been too jam-packed with odd feelings. Feelings I wanted to ignore and embrace. What was with Sasuke? The Uchiha hated me for 2 years. What was with the sudden interest in me? And Gaara? My knees went weak. Why was he an ass in front of others, but so unguarded when we were one-on-one tonight? I glanced at my sleeping roommate, stripped quietly, climbed into bed and listened to the sounds around me, making my brain go blank. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.